pitchers cheating in baseball, Aaron Rodgers skipping out on minicamp, college football possibly changing. Will fields start? Well, today, folks, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. It's Q Hot Takes, and it's right now. Welcome. It's a great day to be alive. I'm here with Kevin Slattery, Justin Ellis, a.k.a. Jelly, and Mr. Andrew Marshall. Will come on a little bit later. He's at his bro's graduation, so we get it. And for the first time in a while, let me say welcome to our podcast listeners, our Apple listeners, Jelly's Twitch watchers, and our YouTube watchers. All four combined. Hope y'all are doing well. And just to start off, do you hate Trae Young more than Kevin? Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, the Phillies have had back-to-back walk-offs the past 2 days, so against the Braves nonetheless. And, to be honest with you, you got to smack Atlanta one way or another, so we're just going to smack them from multiple angles. So, yeah, screw Trae Young.
Nice. I love that. Kevin, how are we doing? And do you still hate Trae Young after your season's already over?
I mean, I didn't expect my team to win the championship, but Trae Young is a villain. Trae Young is he's like an antichrist in New York at this point, I would say, in terms of just how he's, riled up the crowd. And he's in NBA lore now, along with Reggie Miller and Michael Jordan, for infamous New York sports villains. So he's stayed there. I think he wants to stay there. I think he loves staying there. And you know what? I'm okay with it. If he likes the hatred, I'm okay with hating him.
All right. Respect to that. All right. So let's start off the show. We'll get right into it. We'll work with the NBA first, and then we'll get into the NFL, followed by the MLB and some of the cheating stuff that's been going on lately. So thoughts on the second round so far? So basically the Nets have smacked the Bucks a couple times now. The Suns are rolling. Clippers and Jazz obviously having a little bit of a closer time right now. How we feeling so far, boys? And I guess, are the Nets just going to plow all the way through this? We'll start with you, Kev. I know you said you didn't want to see this happening, but you thought it could. So how do you feel about it right now?
I thought this would happen, where I thought they would steamroll through the first two rounds, but Philly is waiting. I think Philly, they're in a little bit of a dogfight with Atlanta. I do expect them to pull through. I think Joel Embiid will pull them through, but not having James Harden, I think, hurts them. I think they're in a dogfight potentially with Philly the next round. But still, I mean, competitive series, though, for Atlanta and Philly. Milwaukee, I sold all my stock on Milwaukee before the playoffs started. Year in and year out, last 2 years, they've disappointed me.
All right, fair. And Justin, I don't know why I left out the Sixers on that one, but I think I was subconsciously just waiting for you to show up. So how you feeling about those Sixers too? And I mean, if you play the Nets next round, how you feeling so far?
I mean, I'll tell you, you don't really need to mention the Sixers because I do think it'll be an irrelevant series by the end of it. No way the Hawks can shoot 23s in a game again. They just can't. It's just impossible for them. They average 12 per game. So that was a very lucky game one where they were up by almost 30 points and brought it within one in the last minute. So they haven't looked good for 5 quarters now. As far as what the East may look like after that, the Nets, it'll be the Nets that we play. I think it'll probably be a full 7-game series, to be honest with you. I think the Sixers match up a lot better against the Bucks. The Bucks could match up better if Middleton remembered how to play basketball. I don't know if that's like a Space Jam reference, like he's lost all of his power to play basketball in this series, but I mean, they brought in Holiday to make it a big three, and it certainly does not look like a big three at this point. It looks like Giannis trying to survive and getting drowned by the Nets. The West has been interesting. If Sam was here, I'm sure he'd be really on his high horse about the Suns at this point, and I don't blame him. They look great. They look like, against the Nuggets, it might be an easy ride for them to get to their conference championship too. And Clippers and Jazz will be an interesting series. It's a really close game one. Way too early to tell what's going to happen with that.
I'm glad you mentioned that Drew Holiday possibly being a big three for the Bucks, because I think I've said this many a time on this show, how Middleton being an all-star to me is always the most perplexing to me. I find him to be the worst out of every all-star every year. Justin, I've told that to Justin McKevin's heard it in my room probably daily. Drew Holiday really being the third guy, it's a problem. It's problematic. And frankly, the fact that Blake Griffin is playing good defense against the Greek Freak is showing some problems for the Bucks, absolutely. And I'll ask you, Kevin. We touched a little bit on the East side, and I know Justin just talked a little bit about this Suns, and maybe you can speak in place of Sam. How do you feel about the Suns team? Are they going to be in the finals? Are they as hot as they seem to be?
The Phoenix Suns, I'm buying all the stock on the Phoenix Suns. You're talking about Devin Booker, who I think is putting himself up there as just making it be known as one of the best tough shot makers. I mean, if you're looking at a couple of those games that he had, how many times did he get fouled, like sandwiched on a pick or something, and then he makes like a contested, fall away jumper from three, or a contested fall away mid range shot like Kobe? I mean, Devin Booker, I think he's positioned himself. He's going to be a top 10 player in the league. Chris Paul, the ageless wonder, came up big in the final third quarter, fourth quarter of the last Nuggets game. DeAndre Ayton has been sensational, not even as primarily a post guy, but just dominating the glass. And they got long athletic guys who bother perimeter players like Michael Porter. They're a really hard team to guard. And they're a great defensive team too, being able to just play passing lanes and get on the fast break, but be able to control the other team's fast break opportunities. I really like Phoenix, man.
Now, Justin, you mentioned Chris Middleton earlier, and now we're going to lean more towards players that need to fix themselves in order for a team to have any shot, any hope whatsoever in breathing on a finals court. So maybe aside from him, unless you want to drill him home, who you think really needs to be stepping up more than they have been?
It's probably Middleton, like really badly. Even Lopez has looked relatively decent on the court during the playoffs. Like, I think he had 20 points in game one. So I don't think there's much Lopez can do about it. I think Giannis should be playing a bit better. That just comes from taking so many shots and being tired that you do hope that your supporting cast backs you up a bit. He's one of the healthiest players probably in the NBA right now as far as like top stars go. So it's still draining nonetheless because he hasn't had like the injury rest that many of the Nets players have had at one point or another. So that's a really big impact on the Bucks. Other than that, as far as other players who need to step up, if the Hawks want to win the series, which I think is relatively improbable in my opinion, and you know me, I don't talk very highly about Philly sports all the time.
That's true.
I'm very pierced on this point that if the Hawks want a chance to win, Bogdanović has to play like he did in game one, where he hit like 5-6 threes. Because they were talking about he never found his momentum really in that Knicks series, and the Hawks got by just fine. But if you want to play against a team who has had 10 more wins than you this season, you have to expect that some of your contributors, especially from the three-point line, need to kind of show up. So I feel like if the Hawks really do want to take this further than 5-6 games and try to force a game 7 toward the back end of the series, it's going to take Bogdanović showing up because Trae Young isn't going to just be able to throw long passes to Clint Capella all day. He looked great in that game one, but he's not going to be able to continuously do that and expect to win every game.
I will say those Knicks fans have really bled into other fandoms when it comes to making fun of that guy. Jeez Louise, everybody's giving him a hard time, but apparently other players have said finally people are recognizing that he's a big crap talker in the league. But anyway, Kevin, when it comes to you got players that got to fix themselves outside those two guys that Justin mentioned, or you want to hammer one of them home? How you feeling?
Well, Middleton's probably the obvious one. Middleton, to me, I've always felt he's a very good regular season player, but like what you said, White, he's not a guy you want as your second option on a championship team. Even though he's a skilled player and he can make jump shots and he can do off the dribble stuff, he doesn't create a lot of space. Like, he's not a guy who creates a lot of separation either on drives or jump shots. So he takes a lot of hard shots. And no matter who you are, the more hard shots you take, the more difficult it is for you to make them. Devin Booker, I just said he's a great tough shot maker, but Devin Booker has a ton of burst getting to the rim that a lot of guys also just don't have. Like, he has some God-given ability in terms of just being able to go on a straight line to the rim that a guy like Chris Middleton or even Giannis to a lesser degree doesn't entirely have. Like Milwaukee, they have skilled guys, but they don't have a lot of guys who have great athletic bursts that can get a lot of easy shots. They're a tough shot shooting team, and they don't always make the tough shots at a high level because it's so much of their repertoire in the postseason. So that's, I think, my concern. Like, that's not like an advanced analytics thing. That's just like what I see with Milwaukee. And I think they could potentially get swept. But I don't think there's anything really they can do because that's like in their DNA as a roster.
Yeah. it's unfortunate because I've been rooting for the Bucks for years, just as a side fan, a side bandwagoner, whatever, to finally beat a team like this. It's super exciting. But you're right, Middleton, that first, I think it might have been the first or the second game. I believe he started 0 for 9 or maybe 0 for 8, and he just kept taking fadeaway jumpers. And I think it was Marv Albert that might have been on the announcer's mic, and he's like, yeah, at some point he'll make his shot. I was like, why though? Like, now he's just a liability. I don't like, yes, he was an all-star, but now he's a liability on the court. I am a strong believer in, if you're missing so many shots, stop shooting. I don't care how good you are, unless you really are one of the best in the world, right? If you're a top 10 player at the time, maybe you keep shooting. But 0 for 9, when you're the secondary player on that team, that was disgusting to watch, actually. So I will leave it at that. And I don't think that's a bad take that the Bucks could get swept. I think it'll be 5 games. I think maybe they'll squeeze 1 because maybe Durant won't shoot 50%, but they're going to go down hard and real hard for sure. Speaking of the powerful Nets, will the Nets win the finals? We've been talking about this all year long, but now it's getting down and serious about it. Now they're really proving themselves, bothering me to the core, but proving me wrong all semester long. So how do we feel about it? Will they win? Justin, we'll go to you first. I know you said the Sixers are going to be a big haul, 7 games.
I'm still in on the Sixers being the Nets. I think that is probably their biggest challenge outside of maybe the Suns at this point. I think the Nets honestly match up really well against the Suns. I think that'd be a very difficult win for them. But I'm not in on the Nets yet. I really do think the Sixers are the better team. At this point, it really just feels like it's Suns, Clippers, Sixers, Nets. I feel like there's no other way I can really look at it as far as the top contention teams, and that's giving a really bad rap to the Jazz at this point to kind of say that. But I just don't think the Jazz are a finals winning team. Could they make the finals? I will say hesitantly, yes. But can they actually clutch up and win a 7-game series against the Nets or Sixers? I would be absolutely shocked. I really couldn't see it.
That's fair. That's fair. Kevin, any other takes, or you think Donovan Mitchell is taking the Jazz and they're gonna sweep every team moving forward?
They are a great team. I think in the West for the whole season, them and Phoenix have been 1 and 2 clearly. But if you're talking going into the postseason, they're a really talented team, but they're not the deepest team, if this makes any sense, where you have a clear starting lineup. You have Mike Conley, and then you have Donovan. But outside of that, like Mike Conley's missed the last game. That forces a lot of guys to move up in their rotation. So now you have a guy like Jordan Clarkson, who I think Jordan Clarkson is one of the better 6 men in the NBA at this point. You have him moving into the starting lineup where it's like Donovan's playing, point guard kind of. And Donovan can play point guard, but his strongest assets are, like in Devin Booker, scoring and being the shooting guard, and then having him do off-ball stuff and trying to just score as many points as possible in bunches. But when you move everybody up, they don't necessarily have the depth on their bench, I think, to replicate that if they miss a guy for some time. So I think Mike Conley being healthy is incredibly critical for the team. Phoenix has more guys that they can just throw at you. Torrey Craig, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. Like, they have a lot of guys they can throw at you. So I would favor Phoenix over Utah. But I would favor Utah over the Clippers. The end of that Clippers game, I know they lost. I know it was close, but that left a sour taste in my mouth in terms of just, I don't know, a lot of reasons. I'm not going to get it. It's too long, but
it's a momentum herder, I think, is something that can definitely be said. Like, that was a game the Clippers had in hand, in my opinion, at one point. And another guy who needs to step up is Paul George at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't even have to play great. They were really close to winning that game, and he did not play well at all. At this point, if anyone else was taking the shots he was taking, they would have won that game. Like, literally just give his shots to anyone else, and they'd win the game. So, honestly, I mean, you could just have Paul George on the court, and I know people don't say this really in the NBA, but he could be a diversion almost on the court because he just has that namesake. Like, that's something we hear about in the NFL all the time, is like, you play your injured wide receiver, you're not going to throw to him, but he's going to be a diversion on the field. I just feel like in the NBA, it literally, if Paul George is out there for his namesake, someone has to guard him, and it's going to keep the court still open. If anyone else is taking those shots, the Clippers are winning some of these closer games, in my opinion.
I think
it's very true. I mean, Kev, you can talk right 1 second. I mean, Kawhi Leonard has been playing off the charts. I mean, 40 plus points a game, multiple times, shooting out of his mind. Just an incredible guy that I feel like every year, just because he doesn't have a loud mouth, you kind of gloss over. You look at his points and it's like, oh my God, he scored 48 points on 50-something% shooting. But you just, it's Kawhi Leonard, whatever. But when Trae Young makes 4 or 5 threes in 2 quarters, Bleacher Report is pounding your Twitter feed over and over and over again. Ice Trae, all that. And that's no hatred towards Trae Young, but it's just the loudmouth guys normally get more action. Same with a guy like Odell Beckham when it comes to the NFL relative to, literally any other guy that just doesn't talk as much. And that's a problem. The Paul George thing as an illusion. If the Bucks want to do that with Middleton too, I think they can sign a waiver and join the same type of thing. But Kevin, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's all good. Paul, you have a good point though about Paul George, because he, in a game like that, I'm starting to think Paul George might be somewhat cursed, because I don't know what he did or what curse someone put him on, but he had some gorgeous moves in that game. In the first quarter, he had an ankle breaker on one guy where he drove right and he dribbled so hard behind his back the other guy fell, and the Clippers bench was ready to celebrate. And it was like a 8-foot jump shot, and it just went in and out. But the move was gorgeous, but he just didn't convert. And it was a couple times like that where he made a gorgeous, in traffic layup. He got through multiple guys, and then just the ball rolled out the rim, just in and out jumpers all day. And it's I can't explain that. I don't understand. Because it's not like Middleton where you're like, oh, that looks like a force. You're like, oh, he just got to the cup through 3 guys, and he just did a reverse up and in, but the ball just rolled out of the cylinder when it was 3 quarters down. Yeah, I don't understand.
And I don't know if he's maybe feeling weird about being the shadow of Kawhi Leonard. As if you want to, I'm going to randomly bring up Porzingis in this situation where I'm sure both of you read about how he was frustrated that he is what did he say? I'm in the shadows of Luka Doncic, and he wanted to be considered a co-star with Luka Doncic. And I had Porzingis on my fantasy basketball team, so I know a thing or two. And I would watch him sometimes. And don't get me wrong, Porzingis is obviously a great player, but he's not Luka Doncic. And he made it very clear this year. And all the comments, when at least I was reading, it was, well, how about you don't be the 7'2" guy who refuses to go in the paint? So I don't know if Paul George is feeling a similar way, but I must bring this question about Porzingis. Kevin, you've been making some noises over there. Is he a co-star to Luka Doncic, or is all this correct?
I don't think he's a 3 option on a championship team.
I agree with you.
Go off.
Keep going.
Porzingis, man, he had so much promise in New York, and I never thought I'd say this, but I was happy. I'm happy now they made that trade because they ended up getting Julius Randle. But he came there. Mark Cuban thought he was going to be the number 2 guy. Not even the star, just the number 2 guy. A guy who can rim protect, a guy who can, shoot the 3. And he's been none of that. He actually, if you look at his defensive metrics, in terms of, I don't have them in front of me, of course, but there were defensive metrics that showed he got worse defending the rim. And if you look at the eye test, he wasn't the shot blocker that everyone thought he was going to be. He got taken to the rim repeatedly by guards. If you watch any of the games, in the last series, he wasn't a strong rebounder at all. Guys can post him up even though he's 7'3" and just back him down. And he doesn't hit threes at a high rate at all. He hits them at a 32% clip. And he doesn't have a great mid-range game. You can just kind of knock him off his spot. And that's just kind of oh, whatever. And I can't get to the rim because I don't have low by. So it's what was Luka supposed to do? He was playing with a a 12-point a game guy who thinks he's like a co-star.
Well, it's I mean, you mentioned the blocks. I just looked it up really quick. It was 1.3 blocks a game for a guy who used to be in the twos. And when you're at that height, it's a little bit alarming. And yeah, the third, I mean, he shoots in between 8-ish 3-pointers a game as a 7-foot whatever he is, and they don't go in. They don't go in like they used to go in. He thinks he's a guard. It's like that guy Puchilovsky from the Thunder, who's like 18 years old and does the same nonsense. Skinny tall guys just pretending like they're the next Devin Booker.
Yeah, like he's a Roy Euro, and yeah.
Embiid can hit some threes a lot of the time. Let me get this clear. But
Embiid doesn't hang around the perimeter and waste everybody's time.
He used to, but now this year he's so much more going to the rim and posting up.
Now he cares a bit more about being in the paint with his torn whatever it is that isn't really torn. I don't know. But Porzingis is basically out of my caring of even considering top 50 players at this point. He might be near the end of 50, but I wouldn't think of him when I think of a top 50 player at this point. Besides the fact that I might not be able to name 50 players.
Yeah.
But legitimately, I would rather have Middleton right now than Porzingis. Literally right now in this moment.
I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I would rather have. Right. I mean, before I would still probably have Middleton over Porzingis. I mean, even now when Middleton is at possibly his worst, I would probably still take Middleton or Porzingis. I do think Middleton's a better player. I just find Porzingis very injury. He's just so injury prone at this point, and when he does play, he's not good. He's hampered by something at this point. And I think that's the difference I see because we came here from Paul George. The difference between the two is George kind of chose this life to go there. He was traded, but he was basically asked by Kawhi to come. And he was like, sure, I'll come. And if he has upset about being in Kawhi's shadow, then shame on him for putting himself in that situation, and he'll have the team next year when Kawhi leaves if they lose. So he has that going for him at least, but I don't know. Both of them are just out of this world bad right now, but I do think George will play better eventually. Not this year, next year.
Well, Kev, you mentioned Julius Randle, man. How do you feel after that last series? I mean, do you want that guy on your squad? I don't know, man. That was abysmal.
Well, I will say this. He was a guy who they game planned for, and he was a guy who didn't create a lot of separation always all the time. Not all the time, but there were times where he didn't create a lot of separation, and that showed in the postseason where he had to go for, fall away twos or 3-pointers. He didn't get downhill to the rim a lot. And if he did, it was normally for an offensive foul where they set up. I'm still high on Julius Randle because of what he did for 72 games and the fact that there were times when he showed up and he was big time. And there were games I would tune in where either it was Milwaukee or Charlotte sometimes. And I saw things from him that I didn't see. He would just bring the ball up. He'd do a hard and dribble 3-pointer through the legs a couple times, and he'd do a step back 3. And I was like, whoa. I was like, wow, that's impressive. I hadn't seen that type of development in years past. And I think he's a guy who you build around. I don't know necessarily if he's the guy you win with as, the main attraction on a championship team, but I think he's a guy you keep around. You build the team with him, and you try to get other stars to come. Him and RJ, I think also, too, they're relatively young. They're going to get better. This could be an ascending Knicks team. But I just hope they don't panic, though, and then trade everything for just one guy, and then the team just stinks.
I saw, what did I see? I'm not going to remember all of it, but I did see a situation where Kawhi ends up with the Knicks. And it was Kawhi, Randall, Robinson, Barrett. I'm trying to remember who the fifth man was on that. They got.
I saw that with Lillard, though. Damian Lillard.
Really? I saw a Kawhi one.
So would somebody?
Did we lose him?
You good, White?
We lost you there.
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Are you still with me or anymore? Or no.
Now we hear you. Yes.
Okay. Yep. Sorry. So the best odds if there were a trade for Damian Lillard are the Knicks. That's according to all these books, I guess you could say.
I mean, with how much cap they have, I think it wouldn't be impossible for them to get Lillard and Kawhi. That'd be a starting five right there. That would make sense because, yeah, that would make sense.
That'd be a fun team. Those are two of my favorite players, man. So that's kind of like a dream. That'd be a dream scenario. I've seen them get shunned for so long by the upper echelon of the NBA that I'm not going to speak it into existence, but trust me, I'm really hoping if that did, that'd be like the best Knicks summer in like over 40 years.
Imagine the Knicks Nets games.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I just want the Knicks to beat the Nets in the sense that there's no such thing as a real Nets fan anymore. They're all full of crap. The real ones who are New Jersey fans, I have a bunch of friends who were New Jersey Nets fans back in the day. Growing up with the end of Jefferson's career and Vince Carter when he was unreal and stuff.
Darren Williams.
And and it's not the same anymore. This team was bought, as Justin's made clear throughout this show for months now, that he doesn't appreciate just teams that are bought out, And I respect that take as well. And when you watch the Nets game the other day, they have this chant, the Brooklyn chant, that one. So normally that ramps everybody up. Everybody's all about it. They're into it. And after one Brooklyn, it died out. You couldn't hear it anymore. And I feel like it's just a lot of people who are going into Brooklyn to watch, Kevin Durant, Harden, Kyrie Irving, and the Greek Freak playing on the same floor. They don't really care about the Nets, whatever. It's just amazing players.
See, that's why you got to be a Sixers fan. If anybody watched Game 2 and saw the end of that game, where I think it was Kevin Huerter was shooting free throws, if you miss 2 free throws in a row in Philly, everyone who has a ticket gets a free Frosty from Wendy's.
Yes.
See, this is why Wendy's is the greatest place on earth.
People are hyped about that. They were up by 20, and freaking people are freaking out about free throws. Greatest
that's
moment.
fun. That's fun. That's great.
That.
Especially if you get a guy like Giannis at the line or somebody else. That's great stuff.
Yeah, if only they did it every time Ben Simmons missed 2 free throws, then everyone would have Frosties for years.
Yeah, Ben Simmons. Man, that guy he's a problem when it comes to that. Oh boy. But I will say, the fans that everybody needs to remember, have you seen some of the Islanders, the goals when they score, or that crowd? Oh my God, Kevin, I don't know I think you said your dad is a fan, or maybe he's a Rangers fan or something, but
yeah,
this is like 3 out of the past 4 years I've occasionally seen the Islanders in the playoffs. Their fans are crazy. Oh, it's amazing.
Especially against the Bruins.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Which I like. So
yeah, I'm like, I don't love either of those teams, mainly because, their fan bases give off the vibe that Eagles fans give off, and I'm not their fans, so I hate the vibe.
Of course.
But they're like, they're aggressive, man. I'm never here to see the Islanders or Bruins win, but I'll take the Islanders over the Bruins. The Bruins are cocky.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Anyway, let's go with our last NBA discussion of this show. And we're going to do it with our top 5 point guards of all time. So recently, this was brought up by Stephen A. Smith. Justin, do you have what Stephen A. Smith has, or should I look it up real quick?
I had it 2 seconds ago. Give me 1 second to re-pull it up.
No worries.
I know I can start naming his top 5. His number 1 was Magic Johnson.
Okay.
Definitely.
His number 2, I believe, was Steph Curry.
I am looking it up right now as well.
Strong.
On the way I got here. Yeah, his number 2 was Steph. His number 3 was Oscar Robertson. His number 4 was Isaiah Thomas. And his number 5 was tentative. He said it was Chris Paul if the Suns win this year.
Chris Paul if the Suns win.
Ooh.
I see.
I can respect that list.
Listen, actually, you know what, Justin, do you have a list? Would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll send it. Number 1, I'll agree with Magic Johnson. That guy was always a beast. He has 5 titles to his name. You can't disrespect Magic Johnson at this point. Number 2, I've got Oscar Robertson. He was the original triple-double maniac. He deserves so much credit for what he did during that time. He scored more points. I think he had a better points per game average than Steph Curry, which made me a bit surprised that Curry was actually above Robertson on Stephen A's list.
Hmm.
So I have Robertson 2 and then Curry 3. I do have Chris Paul at 4 already, regardless if he wins this final or not. He has so much accolades to back him up throughout his career. He really is like an absolute pro. And I mean, you look at the next point guard on my list, you'll see other point guards decline very quickly in this league. And Chris Paul has continued to be an excellent player wherever he is. Like Chris Paul and the Suns, I mean, everyone was like, yeah, the Suns are a playoff team now, but nobody thought they were going to be this good immediately thanks to a Chris Paul elevation. They can say it's coaching and like chemistry and stuff, but Chris Paul elevated that team to an extent I would have never imagined. I mean, they were talking about just picking up like a forward here or there and trying to elevate some other things. And I was like, Chris Paul seems like a lot for a strong guard backfield already, but this is a complete elevation, and Chris Paul's just always been an absolute beast. Number 5, I do have Russell Westbrook here. He's definitely not who he used to be. His points per game is amazing, and I respect triple doubles so much because that shows like true athleticism and like true ability. I really value the triple double when I came to my list at the end of the day. That and points scored, because like literally assist and rebounds, that proves you can do it all, in my opinion. If you only get all of those high.
That's a fair take, and in the same regard, I'm gonna talk about defense and how that matters to me a lot. So my number 1 and number 2 would be the same as Stephen A's in terms of Magic Johnson and Stephen Curry. I just love Stephen Curry. I mean, I hopped on that bandwagon a couple of years back. I'll admit it. Love the guy. Great player. 3 on my list, though, and this is where defense matters to me. I got John Stockton. Shooting over 50% in his career from the field. I mean, he has the most assists and steals when it comes to those marks. Nobody comes close. And I think to be getting all those steals against point guards is hard. I mean, you see the point guards we watched today. I mean, if you stuck me out there, I'd be in the hospital within about a week if I got a few games out there just for 5 minutes on anybody. So John Stockton for me, and then I also have where did my list go? Chris Paul was number 4, and at number 5 I got Steve Nash. So I'm going with like the super small guys, loving them, but I like that Russell Westbrook take. That's a good take. It's a little bit different, but me and my biased self will leave him out of that discussion for now. So, Kevin, how about you?
Well, I'm going to agree with you and Stephen A. Smith-White. I got to go Magic and Steph Curry 1 and 2. Magic 1, Curry 2. 3 for me is interesting. I go Isaiah Thomas 3 because I think for the engine of a team that often gets overlooked, the Detroit Pistons in the 80s, they won back-to-back titles, and that's not considered as special as three-peating or even going to 8 straight finals like LeBron did. But for that era from 88 to 90, they beat, a Bulls team with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. They beat a Celtics team with Larry Bird, and then they beat a Lakers team with Kareem and Magic Johnson, all for, two finals victories. So you could say like, well, maybe he was the 4th best player of his era. But when you consider that era is Jordan, Bird, and Magic, I think he's probably a top 25 player all time. So that's why I put him I think he's kind of underrated in terms of he gets overlooked with those guys who are celebrated. But for me, he's a top 3 point guard. 4 and 5 are difficult because I value the triple-double too. If you include Oscar Robertson, I think you have to include Russell Westbrook too, because he's averaged a triple-double now for I think 3 or 4 years. Oscar did that for 1 season. It was the average. Wait, was Oscar 1 season? I forget. Was Oscar Robertson 1 season, or was it?
I think it was 1 season where he averaged it, but he still did hold the most triple doubles until Westbrook beat it the other week.
Okay, he held the most, but it was for 1 season. I know Russ was going for the averages for multiple seasons, I think. So I think he was trying to get more averages. I got lost with the records. But I think if you're going to include one of them, you have to include both of them. But on the outside of the top 5, I think you have to consider some of these new guys like a Damian Lillard, Chris Paul. I mean, Chris Paul's been very good for a very long time, like very long time. Like I remember debating people who like they would debate either Darren Williams, Rajon Rondo, or like Chris Paul. And like Chris Paul is still playing at like almost like a pseudo star level, like in terms of orchestrating an offense. So, I mean, it's tough, but I would probably say Oscar and Russ, like Russ 4, Oscar 5. And then some of those other guys like Dame or Chris Paul, like they're on the outside, but they might get moved up soon. Because I can't take away what Dame did too against Denver the other night. That was incredible. That was one of the best scoring performances I've ever seen.
And when it comes to Chris Paul, that guy has taken random teams and just brought them to the playoffs. Whenever he feels like it, he'll take them to the playoffs. If he took the Thunder. Granted, the Thunder are already gonna, but it's just he just does this with teams. He just goes and he succeeds. And his around the free throw line / paint movements around whether it's a point guard or a 7-footer is crazy. He just kind of goes square dances in a little box and then takes a fadeaway smooth jumper, and it's always golden. So love CP. Love him. I actually used to have his sneakers back when they had a camouflage blue and white sneaker back in 5th and 6th grade. I was rocking those. No big deal. Anyway, let's move on. Yeah.
Andrew White.
Yeah, okay. It was on sale. Thank you very much. Probably 40% off or something at Kohl's. Anyway, so we're moving on to the NFL. The biggest news we got so far this was a couple days ago, so a little bit late, but we'll get some opinions on it. Julio Jones, now a part of the Tennessee Titans. I personally did not see that coming. I will admit that here and right now. That came out of left field for myself, although Derrick Henry was trying to get him on the squad, and so was Brown. So, we're gonna leave that first question aside. Do we like it? And are the Titans now just big contenders for the AFC Championship, or do wide receivers not move the needle so much? We'll go to Justin first for this one.
This completely changed my outlook on the Titans, to be honest with you. I originally actually had them with a losing record on my very early predictions. I now have them with, I think, 11 wins and winning the division now over the Colts. They needed a wide receiver too. That was one of the big areas they needed to cover. They lost Corey Davis this past season, who had like his first breakout season for a guy who's supposed to do really well. He's now on the Jets. So they really didn't have a strong wide receiver too. Jonnu Smith was gone too. There really wasn't many options for Tannehill to throw to at this point. So that and the cornerback need were the two biggest things to cover, and they covered the Tennessee problem in a big way. If Tannehill continues to play how he's been playing these past few seasons, which who knows with Ryan Tannehill, I'm not as sold on Ryan Tannehill as other people seem to be. But assuming that Tannehill plays at the level he has been playing, it really changes the outlook for the Titans a lot, especially in regular season. Do I think it changes a postseason outlook? No, I still think there's a lot of secondary problems there that are a major concern, but I'm in on the move. It's a really good move by the Titans.
Kev, how much you loving this for the Titans?
I think they got a steal. An absolute steal. I think Julio Jones, it's only played 9 games. He had less than 1,000 receiving yards. So wasn't like the prime Julio production that, we're normally accustomed to. But I think for the last decade or so, he's been, without a doubt, top 5 wide receivers position. I'm pretty sure that's pretty unanimous for the most part. But I feel like if you're the Falcons, I don't know. I feel like you got to at least get a first for giving away kind of a guy who's been face of the franchise, as much as anyone could be for a non-quarterback. And I don't know. It just feels like they kind of gave him away for a second and fourth. And now, they're in this purgatory where they're going to give away Matt Ryan, but it's like they're not going to move off him yet. You got Kyle Pitts. That's nice. But in terms of for Tennessee, I think it solidifies them more as a playoff team. I still like the Colts over them, but that's more of it's just strength of O-line or an overall roster, better defense, arguably, better secondary. It doesn't change the postseason that much for them, but I think it helps them if they're trying to attract free agents. It's better to have Julio on your team than not have Julio. Like he's going to be better than probably whatever second or fourth rounder they got or they gave up, unless the Falcons do a masterclass in drafting. So Julio, like you got Julio Jones for a second round pick and a fourth rounder. Like
I don't know what
understand.
I don't know what the Falcons were doing, because when you look at it, sure, he didn't play that many games last year, but if you look at all the previous years, he is not injury prone. He's played double digit games almost every year of his career, over 1,000 yards basically every time. It's just last year he had these residual effects, didn't really work out, and so it was a COVID year too. So this was a perfect steal for the Titans to just take it and move on with it, ride the wave of, oh, he's injury prone, and get whatever this deal was. And the fact the Falcons just didn't want him, clearly. They just want to get rid of him. So.
Yeah, I mean, Julio wanted out of it too, and he apparently had made that clear months ago. And I think the interesting thing that we now have to consider is, like, the Julio trade looks like a steal for the Titans, but is this about how the NFL considers wide receivers at this point? We all thought the DeAndre Hopkins trade was preposterous. And I mean, Julio is no DeAndre Hopkins, but he's still a really good wide receiver. And those wide receiver trades, the Odell trade back when that happened was not extraordinary in any regard, in my opinion. I just feel like wide receivers are not even, I don't even know if the word is undervalued at this point. They're just undervalued from where we see them. I think the NFL has a take on wide receivers that if it matters first if you have a good quarterback, and then you can worry about the wide receivers later. But they talk about not paying running backs a lot of money. I don't think teams want to pay wide receivers a lot of money anymore either. I think there is a huge capital to be gained on getting a really good quarterback and paying good money for a quarterback and paying good money for defensive pieces. I think the actual amount of salary that teams want to spend on wide receivers and running backs are now super low and are reaching the same point where teams are like, I can figure out wide receivers if I have like a Patrick Mahomes level quarterback. I can throw a ton of like mediocre wide receivers as long as they can catch the ball and get open on a route maybe 50% of the time, maybe 25% of the time. They're going to make it. The team's a playoff team automatically. It's tough if you don't have amazing pieces in the playoffs, but like you're a playoff team as long as you have the right quarterback there. So I think it's really just telling us that teams are moving a bit further away from the wide receiver salary, and like nobody thinks Julio Jones deserves the money that he's currently being paid. So for a team to take on that salary, you're not going to get a first rounder. And I personally disagree. I think Julio was worth a first rounder. That's just not what the NFL seems to believe.
Right, and when it comes to the Falcons now, how bad are the Falcons going to be? Granted, as Kevin mentioned, they have Kyle Pitts, but Kyle Pitts can't just take the ball and run over everybody in the NFL. No matter how good he is, that's impossible. So let me phrase the question this way. Just how bad will the Falcons be? And I'll put it this way. Do we think they'll have a top 5 pick, or did they blow some of those games last year, possibly on purpose or just a fluke, and they're a mediocre team that can get 5 or 6 wins? What do we think? Kevin, will they have a top 5 draft pick, or can they get those 5 or 6 wins?
Oh, I'm going to go they're going to be able to get those 5 or 6 wins, only because I think there is something to the stability of having Matt Ryan. You do have Calvin Ridley. You do have Kyle Pitts. I don't know. They're going to be the worst team in their division. I just don't know how bad, because I think you're going to have some bad teams. Some bad teams. I mean, don't forget about the NFC East. Do not forget about the NFC East for 1 minute. Or, I mean, we're looking at other teams too. I mean, maybe a team like the Detroit Lions. We don't know what's going to happen. Chicago could be boom or bust. Nagy on the hot seat. We don't know. Maybe they're mediocre. Maybe they're bad. Maybe they're very good. We don't know. But I will say no, only because I think there's going to be more teams than we think vying for those top 5 picks as of right now. And I think they'll fight through a little bit.
Jelly, how you feeling about that top 5 pick? Are they going to win some out?
The Falcons will go 5 and 12 and get the number 8 overall pick in the draft. This is gonna be me trying to make a hot take here, but I personally think that Julio Jones leaving the Falcons does not move the needle much on them. I redid my analysis of the Falcons post Julio Jones, and I had them losing one more game that I had them losing originally. I had them going 6-11 with Julio. And I think that is credit to how good that wide receiver staff already is. Kyle Pitts is inherently going to be the receiver replacement for Julio Jones. Obviously not a one-for-one replacement, but it's still the hands replacement out there. There was somebody who released an analysis today that I thought was interesting that said they think Calvin Ridley will be a top 5 receiver in the league this next season. Knowing the Falcons offense, he might be a top 5 in receiving yards, to be honest with you. They're so pass heavy and they play so far behind all the time. Like Calvin Ridley, it would not shock me at all if he was top 5 in receiving yards next season. Russell Gage had a very good, quiet season last year as well. Mike Davis is supposedly a receiving back. How far do I believe that? I'm not sure. I don't know if that was more an accolade to the Panthers offense, maintaining the kind of Christian McCaffrey vibe with Mike Davis, or what was up with that. But I do expect the Falcons offense to look relatively the same. I don't think Julio moves the needle much at all. And every year, everyone talks about his touchdown production. It wasn't that high. So you're not looking at a lot of points on the board output that you're losing from Julio. You're looking at more from a yardage standpoint. And I feel like Kyle Pitts might not, well, if you're looking at Julio's numbers last year, I think Kyle Pitts could reach those yardage numbers, but he will exceed that touchdown number. I can almost guarantee you that Kyle Pitts will score more touchdowns than Julio Jones did last season. I don't even know how many that is. It's probably like 4 or 5, but I think Kyle Pitts will score more than 4 or 5 touchdowns. So I don't think it changes much with the Falcons.
Yeah, I mean, people forget about Gage, and they forget about, well, nobody really forgets about Ridley, but they forget about Gage, and he played well. And you're right, Calvin Ridley, still, I mean, in my opinion, top 10 wide receiver in the league, at least borderline, right at the edge, out in the backside. So impressive squad, I guess. Wide receiver Lee, but I think Matt Ryan's got to go. But we'll leave that for another day, and we're gonna move on to the Bears and Sir Justin Fields. I got to tell you guys a story before we do this. So right now, I was applying for a job in Texas, and they have this YouTube channel. It's called Chat Sports, and they're looking for hosts of certain, I guess you could say, reporting shows about NFL teams and stuff like that. And I moved on to the next round, and I have a task that needs to be done by Monday, and it's to give a 4 to 5 minute report on, breaking news for the Chicago Bears. So maybe today we'll goof about this with Justin Fields here. He just signed his contract, 4 years, with the 5th year for a team option. But the reason why I brought up this other story is I had to take a test, a quiz. It was a 2-minute quiz, 10 questions, basic sports knowledge. I'll give you a few examples. One of them was what city is the University of Alabama in? Another one was name the 4 majors in golf, kind of those types of things. What team does Jamal Adams play for? All that. And the question that I messed up because I was getting anxious that I was running out of time. It's like 12 seconds per question. You got to type it all out. Was the guy who loves college football. I got the question wrong. That was name the 5 power conferences in college football. One of the most easiest questions I've ever had, and I got 4. And for some reason, I couldn't think of the Pac-12. Granted, we all know my opinion.
The powerhouses that come from the Pac-12.
We all know my opinion. The Pac-12 is irrelevant, but I was so embarrassed, man. I was like, I typed out the 4. It was like the 4th or 5th question. I realized I was starting to run out of time, so I skipped it. And then with 4 seconds left, I went back and I just typed in the word coastal because I just couldn't think of it. And I looked it up after. I was so upset, guys. It was really embarrassing.
Andrew, the Pac-12 gets so much slander, and you have made it worse.
I have made it worse. I mean, for God's sake, I put the freaking the Big 12 in there and the Big 10 or whatever. And I mean, I think those conferences are on the downward trend outside of Ohio State, whatever. I've always thought Oklahoma was overrated, and then the rest of that conference is awful. So, pretty embarrassing, but I hope that doesn't keep me from the job. Who knows?
Don't worry about it, man, because I read a story a while ago on the Pac-12, and it was basically like the guy who was the commissioner. I think it was something along the lines of like he was trying to sell games or something to networks.
Yeah.
and he wasn't getting any takers. So it's not like it's your fault. It's like the Pac-12 because it's like UCLA. It's like I guess with Chip Kelly, it's like is Chip Kelly? No, Chip Kelly's still there, but it's like that's the marquee team or USC if they get like a good quarterback. But it's like big time football, man. It's down south, and like everyone knows it. Like California is good for like surfing and stuff, but just not college football. So
Yeah, I mean their commissioner was fired too, so they're pretty much irrelevant.
True. Maybe it was a trick question. I should have just typed in. Oh, that definitely would have got me the job. If I had the confidence to be like, oh, their commissioner just got fired, but in years past, Pac-12. Yeah.
i.e. conference irrelevant. Like if you said that, you would have gotten the job immediately.
You should have been like, you should have just said fifth conference doesn't matter. Notre Dame doesn't have one.
Yeah, right. Oh, there was so many funny things. I'll joke about it if I move on to an interview thing there. The video I have to make, I'm sure, matters more than a little quiz. But
what I'm most confused about is that this is a place in Texas that cares about the Chicago Bears.
Okay, so they have a studio where they produce their YouTube videos in Texas. That's just like where their studio is, but they have a whole bunch of different teams that they do reports on. Not all of them though. So it was cool. They asked like which preference I would want for like certain NFL teams. And I'm going to put the Steelers because that was one of the few that they had. But I'm going to add, they have a college football one specifically for just Alabama. And I'm going to pitch to them an idea of creating a Georgia one on their behalf. So we'll see what happens.
I thought you were going to say you willingly chose the Alabama one. And I was
chance.
Andrew, how dare you?
No, I will go to the NFL before I go there for sure. Anyway, enough about me. I thought that was kind of a funny story. You guys can make fun of me about. So moving into Justin Fields, just signed that big contract we were just mentioning. First of all, is he going to be starting week 1? Some conversations that he's been doing pretty well in spring training, and he has the opportunity to show out and take over that position if he does well enough. Do we like that? And is he a franchise QB for this squad? How do we feel about it? Kevin, you can go first.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to state the obvious. I think it's that Andy Dolan's going to be starting the whole year. No. I want to see how long I could go with that. But no, I mean, I think 1 or 2 weeks at most, but Matt Nagy knows, and this general manager knows, Ryan Pace, he knows that, look, if we don't turn the season around, if we go 8-8 or anything less, we're fired. We're out. So if you're waiting to start Justin Fields till week 6, even though the season's a little bit longer, you don't have that much time because it's about your job security. You got to start him ASAP, even if you feel like he's not ready. You're praying at this point that he's the franchise QB, the first franchise QB maybe they've had really since like Tim McMahon, maybe arguably, or Jim McMahon, arguably. So it's like you're really hoping that, because if he isn't, it's an 8-8 season or worse, and then you're out. So they're going to start him by week 2, I think, at least.
Such a great landing spot for Justin Fields to possibly have a chance at that position. Yeah. Honestly, couldn't have landed at a much better spot for himself specifically. But Justin, 100%. How do you feel? Is he going to be starting soon, right away? What are your thoughts?
You know me, I'm very in on Justin Fields at this point. I think Chicago is a really great destination. I think Dalton will start week 3. I think he'll play week 2. I think he'll come in around halftime, play week 2, lead a comeback against the Bengals. They'll beat the Bengals. And then he'll go on a tear for a bit. And then the Bears will level out once people start understanding Justin Fields. I think I have them, what was it? I think I have like 9-8 for them right now. Yeah, I have 9-8 for them right now. I'm barely missing playoffs to an Aaron Rodgers-led Packers. If the Packers lose Aaron Rodgers, I'm in on the Bears winning the division. But I do think that like Justin Fields will get in there and do really well. He'll level out somewhere at the midpoint of the season, though. But I think they're an over 500 team if Fields gets in there in the first 4 weeks.
Well, what I will ask, and Kevin brought this up a little bit earlier, if they miss that playoffs, is Coach Nagy out of there? Or do you think he's safe a little bit?
I think you'd have to give Nagy 2 years with a quarterback because you get to see the developmental pattern Nagy takes them on. That's my take. You got to give someone 2 years with a rookie before you completely cave. I think it should be 3. But for Nagy, who has already kind of been on the cusp, it's more likely to. Keep in mind, he made the playoffs this past season with a huge quarterback debacle. I don't think Nagy is bad, and they should have won the playoff game a couple years ago if it wasn't for the double doink that happened against the Eagles. They've been a very quiet wild card team every year, but they are wild card games and playoff games that honestly they should have had a chance to win. So, do I think Nagy's a bad coach? By no means. I think he's done quite well considering the adversity he's had to deal with.
Sure.
I'm not out on Nagy at all at this point. I don't think he's anywhere close to being on a hot seat, in my opinion. At least if I was a GM or owner. But I understand that you need production, and they expected quarterback development that they didn't get from Trubisky, and I don't know if that's the GM, the coach's fault. There's so many different people that could be at fault for that, but Herbert is the do or bust, and I do think it's 2 years if Bears don't produce at least a playoff win, then Nagy will be on the hot seat.
Yeah, and the thing is, I find that Justin Fields has a way better trajectory to have a developmental career that actually turns out into something. I mean, Trubisky, when you saw him get ready, it was kind of, you saw what you saw here, in my opinion. It's not really that much explosivity out of him except for maybe running, but it was just that he was fast. It was nothing crazy. So I don't know how much better people thought he was actually going to get, but Justin Fields legitimately, if he's coached correctly and if he really keeps his head focused and maybe lowers the ego a little bit, he has a chance to be a rock star. So, and Justin, you again are so good at bringing us right to the next point. We're talking about Aaron Rodgers a little bit, whether or not he may be with this Packers, the pack. They've had some struggles with Aaron Rodgers, whether or not he's going to stay or not. His wide receivers are backing him up. They're okay with him leaving. They're not taking it personally. So he missed 3 days of their mini camp so far. He's a potential to have a $93,000 fine about that. Not that really matters. They might even waive it, whatever. Do we think all of this matters? Is it all talk? We talked about this a few weeks ago. I know some of us mentioned it's a little bit all talk. It kind of happens every year, but it's getting a little bit more serious now. So how do we think? Is he gone? And is it going to be Mr. Love standing back there with the pack in September? Kevin, we'll go to you first.
I don't think it's a matter of if, but when. Because I don't know when the cap hit would happen, but I forget if it was like this. I know with Julio there might have been something worked out, but I don't know with Rodgers. I think the cap hit might be.
It was June 1st.
It was June 1st. Okay, so cap hit's kind of gone. I just think that if you, no matter what GM you are, going in what drafting a quarterback in the first round does. There's an expectation that guy's going to be playing on his rookie deal, because it makes no sense to not play him and to just have him sit behind a guy on his rookie deal. And then you have to pay him and then deplete the rest of your roster. So if you're taking a quarterback with your first round pick, that's a pretty universal signal that you're thinking of moving on, in my opinion. I can't think of any other reason. And especially too, it came at an odd time in a contention window where you do have Aaron Rodgers, and I think anybody with a brain would have thought, how would he react to this, or would have asked how he would have reacted to it. So my question for him, though, is he wants out, but where's the better location? I mean, Green Bay, whether you like what they've done or not, they've built kind of a perennial contender, at least in our time frame, at least in our time of watching football. You went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and you've built good teams around them all. They know how to build good football teams. It feels like a situation that could have been prevented. And I don't know if you're going to get a real winner out of it, because Rodgers could go to a place like Denver, which doesn't have as good of a roster, or a place like Oakland that has more questions. And then Green Bay, you could be getting Jordan Love, who, again, the report on him coming out was, hey, he's hit or miss. Sometimes he looks electric. He looks like a franchise guy. And other times he looks like a complete dud, throwing like 3 picks in a game or something. And that's what kind of like the Packers reported too. Rob Dimitrov said the other day. I think he said something along the lines of like, hey, one day he's incredible, throwing four touchdowns in like 20 minutes or something in reps. And then other days he's getting like picked off by the practice squad. So it's like you have no idea what Jordan Love can be. And that's a real concern. Like, I'd rather have the 4 years of Aaron Rodgers left than potentially a question mark. That's just my opinion. But
Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the place Rodgers wants to go is Denver. There's something appealing about Denver because there was another report released today that Deshaun Watson
Hmm.
would choose Denver if he were to be traded. So,
Really?
yes, that came out today. A
The
couple
canceled
former
man.
teammates reported anonymously to some broadcaster, a reporter saying basically, yeah, Deshaun Watson would want to be traded to Denver if he went somewhere. Um, that there is appeal. I think they have a good wide receiver core. It's way more quarterback friendly with Judy, Sutton. They have a couple other speedy guys. KJ Hamler. I don't remember. Someone tore their Achilles. It might have
Well,
been Hamler.
Hamler's he's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and Noah Fant, I think, is one of the faster tight ends in the league. I think Noah Fant could be an elite tight end, um, with a few more years of experience. Like I 100% think Noah Fant could be the next Darren Waller, in my opinion. And their offensive line, they've invested a lot in that offensive line over the years too. I mean, there's still some kind of understanding that offensive line is important back to when they had Peyton Manning. They've always valued offensive line since then, and they've never got rid of that. And their defense has been really good, given they sucked at sacking the quarterback last year, to say the least, which shouldn't have happened with somebody like Von Miller on that team, but it happened. But that's something that can be fixed probably with just an off year and just fixing that this year. So I think Denver is a good team. I think it's a really tough division too. I know some people were running a bunch of like Madden simulations, and I know Madden simulations tell us everything you need to know. And they ran like a bunch of scenarios with Aaron Rodgers on the Broncos, and he made the playoffs, I think, with the Broncos like 15% of the time because the division and schedule is very tough for Denver this year. So is it even going to lead to him getting another title? I don't know. But is it going to lead to him being happier because he's not as stressed out because he doesn't know who he's going to throw to on a given Sunday? Yeah, I mean, that's what's going to happen. So I said all that. I don't think Rodgers is going anywhere, at least week one. Do I think by the trade deadline, if he chooses to hold out into the regular season, do I think at the trade deadline he's going somewhere to like a team that gets their quarterback injured at the beginning of the season and is looking to win? I could 100% see that. And I think that's almost what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, too, is that he may not be out of the woods on this yet, but if he does, I think there'll be more likely to be a big quarterbacks traded at the deadline to possible contenders.
All right. I love that. Insider Jelly. Always doing it. Always.
I still can't get over a team being like, yeah, we might not need Aaron Rodgers.
Hey, the tight end coach was fanning Jordan Love the other day because he was so hot throwing the ball. So Jordan Love, he's the next Tom Brady. I have no doubt in my mind, obviously.
Dude, I feel bad for that kid, man. I mean, he did nothing wrong, and he did nothing wrong. Like, if I was him, dude, I would have rather be traded to the Detroit Lions. I would have taken, and you guys know my slander on the Detroit Lions, how miserable it is to live there, to be there live there. I mean, specifically on the team.
I'm like, Andrew White is not getting a job in Detroit.
No, I mean,
you're just like trying to cancel Detroit.
No, specifically the team.
I didn't say anything about you, Detroit.
Anyway, when you're specifically on the team in Detroit, you just get lost. Nobody cares about you. It's just you barely get primetime TV. It's over. So. And I still would have taken that over the situation now where he is just getting, poor guy.
Yeah. What I like to hope is that Jordan Love gets traded to the Broncos. And then that's a real FU to Rodgers. And you're like, oh, you want to go to Denver? We're going to trade Jordan Love there. And he's going to have a great
That'd be
career.
funny. That'd be funny. It'd be like, hey, you started getting upset when we drafted Jordan Love a couple of years ago, so he's gone now. You're right.
Yeah, they're just like, it was a test of your mental fortitude the whole time.
even though like Rodgers has said outwardly I don't care that Jordan Love was drafted. Yeah, okay.
Nah, we know you care.
Yeah, it's like how there's no Rodgers rate. Yeah, screw off. Anyway,
he's a thoughtful, caring man, so he cares about that stuff.
Anyway, listen, I think he's one of the most, if not the most talented quarterbacks of all time, but he's gotta chill with some of the stuff he says. Anyway, let's move on to wide receiver duos. We're kind of running out a little bit of time here, so I'll just list the wide receiver duos that I thought were relevant whatsoever, and you guys tell me which one is the best. So we got Brown and Jones, the new creation, Lockett and Metcalf, Evans and Godwin, Thielen and Jefferson, if you want a little bit of fun, and Odell and Landry. If you think, maybe I might have missed a duo, honestly. Like I was kind of, I skipped out some of the overrated ones. Justin's nodding his head. He's about to tell me one. But if it's one of the ones I said, let me know. Otherwise, if you got a new one, tell me. Justin, I'm curious. What are you thinking?
This question really hyped me up. I did a lot of research for this question, so I'm gonna give you a quick 7 rundown with no explanation.
Okay, please do.
Number 7, Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel for the Washington football team. I think they're gonna kill it this year. I have no doubt in my mind with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Okay, move on.
Number 6, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods with the Rams. Number 5, Evans and Godwin.
5, wow.
Number 4, I have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett.
I don't think that's a bad one. I don't think that's a bad one.
Very, very solid.
I'm about to blow your mind with my next pick.
Wait, can I take a stab at it?
Sure.
It's going to be Tyreek Hill and Pringle.
No, the Chiefs are not on this list, actually.
Okay, I thought you were just going to name. Never mind. Go on.
I have put DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson of the Carolina Panthers.
Wow.
And this one I do want to
They're
explain because this one's important. There are 3 wide receiver duos that had 2 wide receivers in top 20 in receiving yards this season. And that was the Seattle Seahawks, the Tennessee Titans with Corey Davis, and the Panthers. And the Panthers had the highest ranked receiving yard people, like as terms as which 2 were closest to the top. It was Moore and Anderson. And that's crazy considering that was Teddy Bridgewater throwing the ball the entire season, on top of the fact that Curtis Samuel was also on that team and was top 30 in receiving yards as well. These guys have great output. And I mean, I am not high on Sam Darnold, but I think they are going to continue to look really good. And I really like them as a wide receiver core. I think they're very underrated.
I can't quite yell at you when you're listing out some statistics. That makes sense. So, and also you're right. I mean, I know how much you love Bridgewater, but he's not the best thrower in the world, so I get that. Go on.
Number 2 is Julio and A.J. Brown. Like I said, Corey Davis was a top 20 receiver last season. Receiving yards, Julio will do that if he's healthy. Number 1 was not one on your list. If he's healthy, Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb will be the number 1 wide receiver, are the number 1 and will continue to be the number 1 wide receiver ditto. They put up incredible numbers last season without a quarterback where Ben DiNucci played. And they had 2 top 30 wide receivers. I think they're an insane wide receiver ditto. So I'm 100% in that, if Prescott plays even 75% of what he did last season, they'll be the best receiver ditto.
That's a fair take because I think I was making this list and I noticed that because I was obviously looking up some duos myself and I wanted to have one of last year's rookie inserted in there, and I kind of just left it at the Jefferson one. But I don't know why I took, because in my opinion, Jefferson played better than Lamb, but Cooper is way better than Thielen. So I see where you're coming from, and I get that. I like the top 7. The Curtis Samuel is a little bit odd, but
Curtis Samuel's going to get 1,000 yards this next season, and you're all going to laugh when Ryan Fitzpatrick leads the Washington football team to a playoff berth. I swear.
Well, they might make the playoffs. I think they might make the playoffs.
I swear, McLaurin will get over 1,300. Curtis Samuel will break 1,000 yards, and he'll break 1,400 all-purpose yards because he's going to get 400 rushing yards. Gibson's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher. And that defense is insane.
Yeah,
Washington's
I am on board with the idea that the Washington football team is in first, if not tied for first, in the idea of them winning that division. I'm totally on board with that.
That's exactly what I have.
The Samuel one, I'm like, but I think Terry McLaurin is God tier, and I think he will have over 1,000 yards, no matter who his quarterback is. I think he's unreal. Curtis Samuel, to my I guess you could say ignorance, maybe is bliss in this situation, or maybe it's my downfall. I haven't really watched that much of Samuel, so I can't. It just sounds outlandish, but you see him.
He was great for fantasy football. I'll tell you that.
So was Gibson. And I knew. Trust me, I knew when you got Gibson, it was all over for everybody else. Anyway, okay, Kevin, do you have your favorite duo in this situation? And it could be any other. I don't care which one.
I think, Justin, you touched on it. For me, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Dak Prescott being back. I see them being the fourth best team, but I think they're going to get like a lot of options open in terms of just having Dak Prescott back at quarterback. They're gonna set a lot of receiving yard records also too, because you can't double one of them. They're both too talented. So it's like, well, okay, so they're like one's gonna go all the receptions in. So it's like I see that being a super talented core. I would have to say Mike Evans and Chris Godwin then, just because of the Brady connection there. I have duos that I would want to see. I have duos like for you, White, where Pittsburgh in another year, like if after the rebuild commences, you re-sign Antonio Brown, bring in Le'Veon Bell on a 1-year deal, and
wait,
maybe top 10 receiver.
Before you continue, let me make something very clear about if anybody suggests that a duo on that team is going to be some top 10 duo in the league. If anybody wants to consider the duo and they insert Claypool instead of Johnson with Juju Smith-Schuster, I will die in that debate with you to prove a million times over that Johnson would be the duo with Juju over Claypool.
That's very interesting, Andrew, because I think the Pittsburgh duo, I think Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. I leave Juju out.
Okay, see, that's one I can
yeah.
let that debate fly. It's the Claypool over Johnson's the best wide receiver on that team.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's not a question. I felt that way. Okay, I can't say before he went on the team because the year before that, Juju was out of his mind. But when he was drafted, I think Kevin remembers this. I was telling him this kid was like a stud, and I sounded weird because it's like he's a random guy, whatever. And he's really good. Granted, he drops a lot, but his route running and after the catch, ball running is absurd. It's a very high level. Claypool just bothers me a lot. But you're right, Juju's was horrendous. He's slow. He spent too much time either one on TikTok or two. I guess you could say, he was just hitting the gym a lot. He's huge now. He's almost just turned himself into a tight end. So I hope he pulls his head out of the rough a little bit and gets to work and goes back to old times. But Kevin, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's fair. I like Johnson too. The drops are a big deal because even I think it was a Washington game where it was like he had 2 or 3 drops in that game where it was like over the middle, no one on him, and you're like, oh no, Pittsburgh's going to go on a run, and then it was just like a drop, and you're like, oh, that was a momentum killer, and then they had to leave, kick the ball. I think Johnson definitely is the most talented guy. I wonder though I don't know if he's gonna. The thing is, catching a football, it's all about reps. So I don't know if it was like a reps thing for him because his cuts were so crisp and his route running was so good, and he had speed clearly. So you're looking at him, you're like, all right, this is a guy who's like clearly been training. But it's like, I don't know if he had the yips or something where like the ball just came at him and it just like he dropped it. And that is a real thing. Trust me, I've been there. So it's like,
you've been there. You've been there, catching balls from big men is tough. It's tough.
No, just like,
I'm kidding.
Hey, okay. No, it's just like, football comes your way. You're not expecting it. You drop it and then, people yell at you. So it's like,
totally,
you get the yips. But, I don't know. It's just, I think Claypool, I would bank on him more than Juju. Juju, I thought Juju was going to leave, honestly. Like, I thought he was going to go to Buffalo or somewhere else. Like, I thought he was going to be kind of as like a third option, tucked away type of guy. This might be his last year to kind of like prove it in order to maybe get like a payday or something. I could see him just getting run out of Pittsburgh because I don't think the fans would want him back if it's the same type of year. He's a nice guy, but those Pittsburgh fans, man, they're demanding.
They are. The last thing I'll say about it is, in my opinion, Brown and Jones is number 1, but you won't notice it this year because Derrick Henry will rush for 1,400 to 1,600 yards, if not 1,800 yards, and you won't notice it as much.
Probably 1,000 yards.
But those guys are disgusting, and they always will be. All right, we're going to wind down the show here. A couple of baseball things and a last question about the college football playoffs. We'll make these baseball ones a little bit quick. The MLB is now cracking down on, I guess you could say, substance use, pine tar, whatever you want to, for pitchers using sticky things to make their pitches have intense spin rates, intense velocities, whatever you want to say. I'm in favor of cracking down on it. I'm sure Kevin might be, but that is a take he can give, of course. But I mean, they've exposed guys like Trevor Bauer, who even hated on it back in the past, and then he was caught doing this the same thing. So that's pretty uncomfortable. I believe Yu Darvish is under a little bit of, I guess you can say, watch right now after a couple of days ago. I love that they're doing it. I hope they really are focused on it because, there are some batters that were normally pretty good that are struggling, greatly struggling. And I believe it is painful for baseball that there are so many batters struggling.
I think you mean like everyone in the league is struggling.
Yeah.
Like literally, I don't know the American League stats, but the National League, the Nationals are leading an average right now with like 255. The Phillies are fifth at like 230. It's crazy.
In my opinion, you are not a good hitter if your batting average is under a 280. And I know that's like kind of a high standard or whatever, but I feel as though these guys have been playing so long, they've been training so long to be considered good. I'm not saying you stink at baseball if you can't hit DeGrom for 280, but to have an average of under 280, you're not good or great or whatever. And you look at a guy like Francisco Lindor, I don't even think he's batting 200, and that guy just signed a quadrillion billion dillion contract. So this stuff's got to go. There's no way pitchers just got that much better in a year or two. It's crazy. I mean, how many guys have under a 2 ERA? I think there's like 3 or 4 guys, or at least around a 2. That number used to be an absurd number to get. So it's cool for pitchers, but it's going to ruin baseball if nobody starts hitting. So they might have to juice the balls again. Anyway, Kevin, what's your take?
I guess you could say, obviously it's ruining the game. Obviously it's hurting offense. But in terms of what I've kind of realized is the moral hang-ringing of, what is cheating, what isn't, what is right and what is wrong. The culture of baseball, more than almost any other sport, has been about cheating. It's been about finding ways that you could just game up on people. And I even got in with the moral hang-ringing over like the Astros and like, like that was a disgrace and stuff. But everything from roids to this to sign stealing with computers to robots breaking down film to having mob gamblers throw a World Series because the players weren't getting paid enough. So they're like, screw the owner. We're just going to throw this World Series right here. Like baseball's just had numerous scandals throughout history for different reasons. And I don't know if you're ever going to change that because there's so many different avenues for cheating to happen. There's so many different ways to cheat in a baseball game. And with technology, with science, with anything. I mean, there was one story I read. They were bringing in, for one team, a chemist to find out what substances were best for spin rate and getting movement on the ball.
Oh my God.
Like teams were bringing in chemists. Like they're bringing in like
they were purchasing, like paying a chemist or something.
Yeah, they were talking about like the different forms. Like one of it's just like sunscreen and rosin, but some of the other stuff, it's like something called pelican glue where you like make it in a lab. There's all sorts of different substances that they're making. One involves like boiling the substance in like a can, like a soda can. Like all they're paying chemists or just different people to come in and figure out what substance can increase spin rate. And I'll tell you what, man, like we said that the best pitchers of this era are playing right now. And it's probably because of, performance enhancing substances, because you can't get some of the movement you see on these pitches without something else. Like how can you get a 98 mile per hour slider that just like comes in straight and then like a break from getting to the hitter just dips at like a 45-degree angle.
Off swing.
And not to mention some of these guys last year weren't even coming close to those spin rates, and they've been in the league for years. So that doesn't just occur. You don't just see your pitching coach one day and you're like, oh, that's how you throw an extra like 400 RPM. Like it's just not. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Bauer though is taking on the anti-hero role though of being like, because he was talking about it like when Garrett Cole was like doing great in Houston, and there was always something sticky going on there. But he was saying like, oh, like if only you had a substance where your RPMs could go up by 5,000 more. Like imagine the steals you could get on the trade market. And then like, because there are all stories like, oh, the Astros pitching coach, he's this guru who like rediscovered what Justin Verlander was doing wrong or rediscovered what Garrett Cole was doing wrong. And it's like, well, is it guru or is it like substance guru? And it's like, well, it seems like substance guru. And then Bauer, he even said like Bauer was documenting stuff in terms of like, he's like, you can't increase your RPMs that much without using a substance. I tried every other way. There's no other way. Like he documented this stuff, and then MLB's coming out and they're like, oh, we might have a problem. And he's documenting, he's literally like documenting the crimes in action. If you want to say they're crimes, like he's documenting it in action, being like, yeah, you use this substance, you can boost it up by like an extra 300 RPM versus that one. and then MLB's like, oh, we found something in our investigation. And then meanwhile, they just looked at like a Twitter post.
So awkward. Justin, your take.
You got to wear the right color hat if you're going to use substances.
Yes.
You got to wear a certain hat day. But
black hats.
Very odd. I liked how yesterday Garrett Cole pitched against Josh Donaldson. Donaldson's been talking a lot of BS lately. Garrett Cole struck him out twice with his lower RPM. It wasn't the high RPM that Garrett Cole, chooses to throw sometimes when he's feeling it. But yeah, I mean, and Donaldson was wearing like a rib protector during that game too, because he was scared of getting pegged by Cole.
No way. Is that actually is that true? Or?
He was wearing an actual rib protector.
Wow.
hilarious.
That's hilarious.
I think what it actually shows, and I mean, I haven't looked at all statistics, but if anything, it shows how dominant DeGrom is. I don't think DeGrom's RPM has moved that much from studies. Like
he's just a god. Yeah.
He's brilliant at this point. Like I'm not a huge DeGrom fan. I mean, I think he's probably the best pitcher right now, but I'm just not a huge fan of him. But it's pretty crazy what he is doing out there. Like he's one of those people with a low ERA, and he's just not supported because they put all the money into Lindor, and Lindor what's the word? Should probably get his money back. There should be a full refund.
Give me back. Yeah, right now. God. Did you see? No, go on. Sorry.
No, go.
I was gonna say, did DeGrom, when he was in rehab, he had to go through. I think he was on a AA game.
Oh my God. The Cardinals.
I think he pitched 3 innings and he struck out 8 kids. It's just like of the 9. And it was just like, I saw the video and the caption was like, these guys just trying to make it to the league. And they literally they have to face DeGrom like two leagues like underneath. Oh, it's just terrible.
Yeah, like the elite of the elite.
Yeah. It was the Cardinals AA team. And like literally the Cardinals Twitter was posting like, someone please save us, we want to go home. Yeah, and then the next day they were like, good morning to everyone except DeGrom.
Yeah. Literally the Twitter was like, someone help us. That's awesome. Great stuff. Okay. Last MLB question. This one came specifically from Justin's TikTok, so maybe he can elaborate after I give the question. But the question is Derek Jeter the most overrated baseball player of all time? Now, Justin, I'm curious if this is something you saw, you agree with, or saw there was a lot of like spark about, or you thought of this question and you want to post it on TikTok. What was it?
I saw 4 TikToks within like 3 days saying the same thing, that Derek Jeter was overrated. And there was only one that really went into detail about it. So basically it was looking at all these advanced stats, and like I know you can move advanced stats to say a lot of things, but I thought these stats are very interesting. I never heard of these stats before. Well, I hadn't heard of one of these stats before. The one I had known was offensive run output, which basically is just taking like the output of runs that someone has per year in the league. The average is 100, is the average offensive run output per player. Derek Jeter averaged 121, which is way above average. But with that output, he'd only be 63rd in the league in output, which I think still pretty good. but that's definitely not like an elite in my opinion in today's day and age. But the stat that most surprised me was that like a lot of people talk about how like Jeter has like that jump throw he does at shortstop, that defensive play. There's a stat called defensive runs saved. It's the number of runs saved by a defensive player on the field. Derek Jeter's is negative 152. So his defensive runs saved is a negative number at 152 in his career, which is the worst in MLB history. The second closest is only negative 70.
Wow.
So he is negative 82 worse. And they said, and there are people arguing that he was clutch in the playoffs, and the numbers are identical. So do I think Derek Jeter is a Hall of Famer just because of how he plays, the class act he is, the team he played on? I think he's a Hall of Famer. I have no doubt in my mind it's that. But I think, like, looking at this, he is nowhere close to, like, if I was going to name best shortstops of all time, I don't think he'd be anywhere near my list.
Interesting.
I just think his fielding so bad. And, like, I don't know that much. I didn't watch every year of Derek Jeter's career. But, I mean, you guys are Yankees fans. You probably have a lot of fond memories of Jeter. But do you feel like Jeter was, like, a huge output for those Yankees teams during those years?
So this is what I'll say. When it comes to overrated, I am one to normally always hop on board with the idea that somebody can be considered overrated, even as a fan of whatever the team is. Because most of the time, people are overrated, in my opinion. Most of the greats are, in my opinion, because somebody loves them too much. When it comes to the most overrated of all time, that's where that gets me, specifically because, you know, I could look at other guys like, in my opinion, Barry Bonds right off the bat. I just can't take a guy who cheated and we still look at him in the same limelight. Just a lot of these there's more guys like that where it's not like they're just cheating or whatever. But you know, we just love them so much, like Babe Ruth, one of the greatest ever and stuff like that. But you know, you put him on a field today, you know, realistically, how well is he going to do? You don't know. But by the way, I'm not taking anything away from the. Well, I am from Barry Bonds, but not Babe Ruth. When it comes to Jeter, though, like a career batting average of a 310 and an on base percentage of a 380, to me, those numbers are frankly just indisputable. Like, I understand the defensive like dilemma, and because that jump thing, everybody thought was super cool and all that stuff, and to me, I know the advanced metrics, you can figure out ways to point out, like you said, offensively, it doesn't really do that much. But the idea of a guy for that many seasons legitimately batting 310 I just think that's an absurd number. You're not going to find very many other people like that ever in this game. I mean, especially now. I mean, you look at this year and some of the best guys, it's just not going to happen. A 310 for his whole career, including when he was like 22 or whatever it is, and when he was 100. So it's just crazy. So overrated, I can let my biases down and get on that train, but not most overrated ever. But that's just my opinion. But that's because I don't like cheaters. So, Kevin.
Well, as a Yankee fan, I'm going to say no. For me as a Yankee fan, I don't think he's overrated. But if you're talking general baseball fan, I'm talking like you're a fan of the Diamondbacks or the Brewers. Like,
there are Diamondback fans?
I mean, maybe Brewer fans. I don't know. There's like Packer country though. But
no, there's just Kettle Marte fans. That's it.
I mean, from any other fan base, a lot of people would say yes because of like the negative 152 defensive run save. Like what you pointed out, Justin, like I pulled up an article from Fansite and I saw the same thing. There was something too with his ultimate zone rating, which I don't know how they define that, but I guess like it's his side to side shuffle in terms of going from side to side, ball to ball. It was a negative 76.1, which was also the second worst in that span. So he did win 5 Gold Gloves, but for much of his career, like especially in the later years when A-Rod was there, the defensive metrics supported like putting A-Rod there instead, but it was referential, treatment. People like, hey, Jeter's the shortstop of the Yankees, A-Rod has to go to third. Pete Rose, though, talked about Jeter versus A-Rod, and he said, I think A-Rod's the better shortstop. He slugged more home runs. He was better defensively, stole more bases, didn't have as many hits, but like overall, like statistically more complete player, won more MVPs and stuff. I think though, if you put him on other teams, though, if you put him on like the Diamondbacks, he's probably not as celebrated. Just because those Yankee teams were a product of great team building, great general manager building. George Steinbrenner kind of being out of the picture, banned from baseball. Gene Michaels comes in, builds great teams, gets Tino Martinez, gets Paul O'Neill, gets Bernie Williams, like mashers, guys who can really put the ball in play. And Jeter is not necessarily the best hitter on those teams, but he's one of the better hitters on those teams. He's one of many. And you could probably say that if he was on other teams, he wouldn't be as celebrated. He would still be a Hall of Famer. He wouldn't be as celebrated, though, if he wasn't on those teams. But even that, though, you look at some of his later stats. This was when he was 37 years old. In 2010, he started the season batting .266, but then from July 4th on, he slashed .336 for the remainder of 2011 at the age of 37. So he showed always an ability to produce for a long amount of time, though. And that might have gone overlooked because also, too, after the early 2000s, those Yankee teams were kind of mediocre in terms of what they were normally doing. But Hall of Famer, I would say overrated if you're not a Yankees fan, because you wouldn't appreciate the different, like the timely hits or just the longevity of it. Because if he's on any other team, then he's a Hall of Famer on any other good team, quote unquote, even though it's an exclusive club.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I'm actually going to concede a bit to what Kevin said, because he said something that made me really. Kevin didn't say the whole thing, but I made an interesting connection with the ultimate zone of Derek Jeter. I think that's in part due to the fact that he lived in an era where the shift wasn't as big of a thing. Your ultimate zone does not have to be as big if they're shifting you to wherever the ball's going to be. So, I mean, we can have a whole conversation about the shift. That's for another day. But as far as that, I mean, I think Derek Jeter's number would actually look a lot different if the shift was more prevalent during his time and age. So I think, Kev, you bringing up that point, I can now see, I don't know who the most overrated player of all time is, but I am willing to concede a bit there that I see the point where Derek Jeter may not be the most. I still think Barry Bonds is better, but that's a whole nother drug argument to have with Andrew another time. We can talk about how much we love or hate the baseball drugs.
Well, it's just sad because like I know Barry Bonds was good before he did it, so it's sad. I'm not gonna sit here and say like, oh, if he didn't use it, he was gonna be one of the worst baseball players, because that's just not true. Yeah. I'm not an idiot. It's just I unfortunately have to say I just get rid of his whole career. But you're right. That's a drug conversation for another day.
Just have an all cheating league.
Yeah.
Just have pitchers throwing like super gluing the ball. Just have robots breaking down the film. Just have everybody take roids. Or have one league that's doing all cheating and one league that's doing no cheating.
What's up, Justin?
That's what the XFL and like all those types of leagues should be doing. They should have all the cheating you can possibly have. That's how you have a fan base.
Yeah, that's also how you kill players. So,
it's not worse than 1920s football.
Okay, fair point. All right, so okay, so college football playoffs are considering this is the last question, by the way, for anybody that's getting sluggish. So college football playoffs, 12 teams is something they're considering, expanding it to 12 teams from the current 4. You want my opinion? That's a lot of teams. I think it's super cool. I don't think there's 12 teams that can win. However, the only reason why I would concede a little bit on that notion is because my fan favorite is actually 8 or 6, where two teams get a bye. But the way I can see the argument for 12 is if that goes on for more than 2 or 3 years, then I think the team disparities would lessen, because more players would be more open to going to a Cincinnati or an Iowa State or somewhere else if they're just in the top 12. So for now, I think a top 12, like nobody's going to win. But if you're trying to actually move talent around, it's not a bad idea. It's just that process would take you 3 to 4 years of those bad teams losing miserably in the playoffs, but it might actually turn some talent around. So not a bad idea. I'm sticking with 8 though for my guns. Kevin, will go to you, and Justin can finish off the show.
I'm a fan because this is going to help the Georgia Bulldogs and Whitey out. This is going to no more debate of is Georgia a 4-seed or a 5-seed. You're in, man. You're in.
Yeah, you are.
I mean, for me personally, I like it because I think in any sport, parity matters. I mean, everyone can talk about how great Golden State's run was, but the fact of the matter was you had only 2 teams, and after a while, only 1 team competing for a championship. You knew it was going to happen every year. No one likes seeing 40-point blowouts in football or basketball. Like, yes, we want to see greatness, but we don't want to see greatness that's monopolized to the point where it just eats away at the product and the entertainment value too. I think to your point, White, it will help spread the talent out because to a large degree, if it's only 4 teams, it forces guys to go on the same team. It forces everyone to go to Bama or Oklahoma. And that's how you get a 1-team conference like the Big 12. That's how you get Bama essentially like running circles around all these teams for like 20 years. Is it coaching? Sure, a little bit, but it's also like, hey, you got 16 5-stars. If 5 of them don't pan out, you got another 11. Florida only has 4, and maybe 1 of them hits. So it's like, it's a numbers game. You can't compete with that. You can't compete with that level of talent. So you have to spread it out inevitably. And I think it will help. Bama will still get their titles. They'll still win. But, if can UCF come in now, and can I take them seriously now? Yeah, maybe. Maybe I will.
I saw something, so it would be, I think it's 6 of these conferences they consider the best. I forget what the 6th conference is. And then it's 6 at-large bids. And that 6th one from last year, there was a team that was 11-0. Was it Eastern Carolina or like Coastal Carolina? So,
but fun fact, if this rule was applied this past season, Coastal Carolina would not have made it. They were an Associated Press top 12, but they were not a college football playoffs ranking top 12.
Oh, no
Oregon
chance.
was 12.
What were they, 13, 14?
They were 13th. Oregon
That's
would have
so
been 12.
sad.
Oh,
God. Wow, that's miserable. Anyway, Justin, finish it off with your take.
Yeah, I mean, I think you highlighted the most important point is that there is going to be the 6 top conferences. And to answer your question, Andrew, they actually did not list the conferences. I believe the rule they want to do is the top 6 ranked teams from different conferences.
Oh. Huh.
So this, for example, creates a big issue for Notre Dame. They are not one of the conferences. They do not qualify for one of those conference seeds. And the other rule is that the top conference teams will get buys as well. So in this scenario, Notre Dame will not qualify ever for a bye.
Maybe why don't they just join the ACC like last year?
Exactly, bro. Just join a conference. You're not better than everybody.
They probably will join the ACC. I feel like if this goes through, they'll join the ACC within 2 years. But I'm here for it because it also spreads out conference talent too. We can talk about how we spread talent among the top teams, but now you know that teams like the ones Andrew White forgets, like Pac-12, they'll now have more talent throughout, and the Pac-12 will then be more so remembered by people like Andrew White because they'll have more talent. So that's I think there's a huge conference advantage. I mean, the SEC was actually the team that put this on the table because the SEC knows they're going to have 4 teams in it every year. But it really does do a benefit over time to those smaller teams. You may see a bigger SEC output and win for them to begin with. But as soon as you realize that you can join another conference like the Pac-12 and get yourself a top-ranked team and possibly get you a bye in the first round of the college football playoffs solely because you won your conference and have a better record, that's a huge advantage to conferences like the Pac-12 and the Big 12 who don't usually get as much credit or as much talent as the SEC does.
And what Notre Dame can do is if they never join a conference in their recruiting, they can tell their students or prospective students, hey, listen, if you join our squad, since we're not a part of a conference, you can play the most amount of games as opposed to anybody in the entire country on our squad. Guaranteed you'll play the most games if we go to the playoffs. Maybe that's what they'll do.
The appeal will be, hey, you could join our football team. You can maybe make the playoff, but most importantly, you can watch Rudy all you want. Rudy reruns all you want.
Oh God. Anyway. All right, that'll do it for us. Hey, Q Hot Takes. This has been awesome. This has been unreal. My name's Andrew White, alongside Kevin Slattery and Justin Ellis, or Jelly today. It's Q Hot Takes. Thank you to everybody listening on the YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, or Mr. Purple SSB, the Twitch man. So this is Andrew White saying sweet dreams. It's a great day to be alive, and go Dogs.
Yeah, everyone make sure to check out the Twitch a bit later tonight around 10:15 p.m. You will be seeing some Warzone gameplay from myself and possibly the Squire Andrew White as well. So look forward to that. Also, shout out to Luke Williams. He might actually watching the show just because, he's not well known. He doesn't have much to do with his life. Played on Team USA, helped them get to the Olympics. Todd Frazier said that he was one of the best players he's ever played with as a teammate-wise. Luke Williams played his first career start for the Phillies the other day and hit a walk-off 2-run home run. Absolute stud.
Oh, my turn. So, Luke Williams is a stud, and not much going on right now. Don't have any dates for you guys to check out, but doing well, doing good so far. Most of my teams are out of it right now, so it's like I don't have a rooting call or anything, but I guess Yanks turn it around. But hey, I mean, doing well, doing okay in the basement, chilling.
All right.